This modeling report shows how to build the 132 scale Hasegawa Douglas TA-4 Skyhawk kit. Something about the Skyhawk history. The Douglas TA-4 Skyhawk is a single-seat subsonic carrier-capable light attack aircraft developed for the United States Navy and United States Marine Corps in the early 1950s. It is a relatively light aircraft, with a maximum takeoff weight of 24,500 pounds and a top speed of 670 miles per hour. The Skyhawk was designed by the famous Douglas designer Ed Heinemann. He opted for a design that would minimize its size, weight, and complexity. The result was an aircraft that weighed only half of the Navy's weight specification. It had a wing so compact that it did not need to be folded for a carrier stowage. It could carry a lot of stores nevertheless and was operated from U.S. Navy carriers. Some foreign operators like Australia, Argentina and Brazil also used the jet from their carriers. Skyhawks played key roles in the Vietnam War, the Yom Kippur War, and the Falklands War. Nearly 3,000 Skyhawks were manufactured in various variants including two-seater trainers until 1979. This kit would be finished as a Royal Australian Navy TA-4G. 20 Skyhawks were purchased for operation from the carrier HMAS Melbourne. The aircraft were acquired in two batches in 1967 and 1971, and were primarily used to provide air defense for the fleet. The Hasegawa TA-4J Skyhawk kit was one of the first 132 scale Hasegawa kits that was released around 1981 along with their single-seat A4E Skyhawk. The sprues are in white plastic with some common sprues with the single-seat A4 kit. The decals in this kit number S024 are for a single U.S. Navy TA-4J VF-126 bicentennial bird flown in 1976. There are only a few panel lines and these are raised and very tiny raised rivets are seen as well. That was the mold technology those days and it does not look bad at all. Quite a few aftermarket sets are available for these kits, not only decals but also resin sets. I bought an avionics aftermarket set also released under brand name Black Box. The contents are a bit disappointing as many parts are copied kit parts, notably the instrument panels, so not a big improvement. The escape seats seem to be of Type 1C3. The Australian-made TA-4G model has a dull grey and white scheme. I assume that the seats are correct for this one and that the instrument panels are usable for this TA-4G. I had seen some photos of instrument panels that had more couple of rectangular screens, but probably these were an upgrade retrofit. Some improvements were done for the model. Work started with on the wing. The vortex generators look good and ensure not to damage them during assembly and any sanding. On all parked A4s the slats droop and fortunately the Hasegawa kit has separate slats. But there is however a noticeable step that should not be there. Real A4s have a smooth area here. Most trailing edge flaps also are seen drooped on parked A4s as well. Later A4 versions also had a split upper flap. Here the kit only provides a solid rear wing, so cutting with a razor saw was done to get the gaps. New thin upper split flaps need to be made from new thin plastic card, which will be set closed and set in these gaps. Although Hasegawa provides a sort-on main gear bay interior with tubes in the lower wing halves for the main gear bays, these are a bit thick and undeep. I will simply cut these out and they can later be glued to the upper wing halves. The wing was rescribed with a scriber using the raised kit lines as guide. Next, the raised lines were sanded off with the now new inscribed panel lines remaining. The step at the slat section was to be made invisible. The wing trailing edge sections were cut. I also decided to remove the ailerons and set these separately later on. The removed trailing edge flaps were sanded thinner and will get a rounded nose. The removed wing area were closed with thin plastic card. These represent the upper split flap section but will be set closed. All needs to be blended in and made flat with putty and sanding. Now, the twin-seater fuselage was tackled. First, as done with the wing, the raised panel lines were to be rescribed. Pencil these out using the kit lines as guide and inscribe. As the fuselage is curved, some flexible metal rules were used to get straight lines. When done, the fuselage halves were sanded, removing the raised details. There are no engine air ducts and when the intakes are set in place, a solid was seen which is quite undeep for this scale. The walls were cut open after drilling a few holes. Take care as the plastic is rather hard. As the resin TA-4 avionics cockpit set will be used, it is necessary to remove the raised inner wall detail in the cockpit. A motor tool was used here. Wear a face mask. It was decided to do just a bit work on the interior. A bulkhead was made from thicker card and in the spares box a big engine fan face found. Some plastic walls for the airflow ducts were made, bended a bit and set. Some dry fitting was done now for the avionics cockpit tub. This revealed that the poured floor is rather thick. I only handle and reshape resin parts underwater as resin dust is very harmful. Some cutting was done under a running water tap, wearing nitrile hand gloves and put face mask on. A part of the wheel well needs to be cut in order to install the resin tub. The cockpit interior was airbrushed Federal Standard FS 36320 with Gunze Sanyo acrylic paint H307, assuming that the TA-4G is not that different from US jets. The console details were painted with a fine brush, looking at photos such as those found in the Detail and Scale book number 32. Colors are black and gray switches. The Hasegawa kit has a bit on deep jet pipe. The rear end was cut off and the pipe lengthened with 2 sections found in the spares box. The fuselage interior is now ready for closure and it needed some putty and sanding. The intakes and wing were installed and any gaps closed. Some white glue comes in handy instead of putty ooshes in the gear bays. The model got now a first base grey coat with Revel 75 Steingrau acrylic paint with the airbrush. The Australian Skyhawk paint scheme was now applied. I opted for markings of this particular TA-4G from VC 724. This will be done by combing decals from the spares box and masking various colored panels. The lower surfaces and the tail areas were airbrushed white, as were the separate ailerons and flaps. For the white I really like the Gunze Sanyo acrylic paint H1, which gives a very fine finish when thinned with the Gunze acrylic thinner. After the white had dried, masking was done and the insides of the flaps and fuselage recess were airbrushed bright red. The white tail with rudder would get the special colored panels and was also masked. The lower areas were masked and the upper gull gray Federal Standard 36440 airbrushed with Gunze Sanyo H325 acrylic paint. The canopy and windscreen were masked and carefully airbrushed as well. I used for the Oxford Blue about FS 15058 the paint Gunze Sanyo H328 and for the yellow the paint Gunze H413, which is approximately RLM04. A few gloss varnish coats were airbrushed with thin Johnson Future/Pledge. This gives a good undercoat for the decals to avoid silvering. Decaling was done with bits from various sheets and from the spares box. Look for more detail at my website. In the cockpit various details were added like throttles. I used the IPMS the Netherlands A4 walkarounds that my modeling friend Kees Hendricks made looking for the details. After the gear had been set in place, the gear bays got more details made with wires and stretched sprue for the many hydraulic pipes seen in a real A4 bay. On the gear legs also, but just a few hydraulic wires were added. A dark wash was added when all was painted mainly white. On the gear door with the landing light, an electric wire was added as well. The wing leading edge slats droop by gravity on parked aircraft. The slat rails in the kit look good, but I think they are 2 mm too long. Ensure a parallel symmetric installment. The avionics seats were used and were painted and detailed. I saw on photos mainly dark gray hues with various colors. Some metal wire was added to suggested buckles and the small pull handle on seat top and lower ones were made from yellow stretched sprue with black stripes added with a toothpick. The big canopy in the Hasegawa kit is fine and you get some internal detail. I added more details as on photos very prominent the locks are seen at the canopy sills. The interior colors in the canopy show black frames. These were suggested with a combination of black decal stripes and painted. 2 pairs of rear-view mirrors came from an old reheat mirror aftermarket set. The refueling probe on the RAN A4 is the crank type. The kit part number A5 can be adapted. Carefully bend with 2 kinks and remove a section of 20 mm aft of the tank mouth. You can also use the crank probe in the single-seat Hasegawa A4E Skyhawk kit. The windscreen was fixed with white glue without any issue after the inside frames had been painted black. The last step is to apply a light coat of gloss varnish to protect the decals and get an even sheen. I airbrushed as usual mix of Johnson Future/Pledge. That's it. Making this kit took about 45 hours overall, excluding researching the history, schemes and decals. Please visit my website where over 500 build models are presented aircraftinplastic.com. Hope you enjoyed this video.